The Murray-Darling Basin Authority says it'll review the proposal to increase environmental flows to the river system. It had wanted to allow at least an extra 3,000 gigalitres a year to flow back into the river at the expense of irrigation. Now it says it may reduce that amount, and irrigators are claiming it's a back down. The move comes after the federal government produced legal advice showing the draft plan may not have sufficient emphasis on social and economic impacts. Hamish Fitzsimmons reports.
The gulf between the expectations of many in the big cities and regional communities over water was again on display today at another tense reception for the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. This time the battle lines were drawn at Murray Bridge in South Australia. But this was a somewhat more conciliatory affair than others.
I do question some of the science, but you have to go with what's best available.
The southern basin's health must be restored, otherwise none of us in here are viable. And one way to do that is to make sure that we don't go below 3,000.
The authority is also facing some tough questions in Canberra. The Minister for Water says legal advice from the Solicitor General suggests the guide plan may have placed too much emphasis on the environment over the economic and social impact of less water for agriculture.
How can the Australian people have any confidence in the Minister for Water's handling of this mess when he sat by and allowed a flawed guide to be released?
The Minister says the legal advice ensures all areas affected by changes to water flow will get equal consideration.
What the legal advice clarifies is it is completely open to the Murray-Darling Basin Authority to go down a pathway which optimises all three, optimises environment, social and economic impacts.
The head of the Basin Authority says he'll seek further advice.
It seems that there's been some refinement in the advice provided and the advice laid before the Parliament, and quite clearly we'll talk further with the Australian Government solicitor to clarify those interpretations. That's the appropriate thing to do.
At a water summit in Melbourne today, the Executive Director of the Basin Plan conceded the authority doesn't know enough about the possible social impact on communities of reducing water flows.
This, in many respects, is the weakest body of evidence we have, and there is not a lot of information that will allow you to understand exactly how an individual community will respond to a change in water availability.
But those who've crunched the numbers of the proposal say there's a lot of misinformation about, and people should look at the realities of the plans.
We're talking about full compensation to irrigators in terms of the sale of their water entitlements. That to me means that they get fully compensated. It seems to me there's enough money on the table from the Commonwealth to be able to provide assistance for the communities to make a difference for them as well in terms of these sorts of adjustments.
Irrigators beg to differ and say the Minister's legal advice has changed the playing field again.
The numbers that are out there at the moment we think would cost thousands of jobs, would force up food prices and would threaten the viability of family farms and regional communities. So we're hoping that the intervention in the last 2 days or so is now leading to a more common sense outcome.
The National Irrigators Council wants the Basin Authority to revise the environmental water flow, and there are clear signs of compromise.
On first reading, the proposals of giving equality to environment, social and economic issues in optimising the outcomes of the Basin Plan, it certainly would mean that we would obviously take less water for the environment than has been currently proposed in the guide.
Hamish Fitzsimmons, Late Line.